So even if you didn't grow up in church, odds are you know bits and pieces at least of the story of Jonah. But if I'm honest, it's a story that a lot of people have a hard time with, even Christians, because if we're honest, it seems more like myth and fairy tale than something that was reality. But as we launch into this important series today, I'll tell you the only reason that I believe that this actually happened. And that's in Matthew chapter 12. In addressing the Pharisees, Jesus talks about Jonah in such a way that he makes it clear that he believed that Jonah was a real historical figure and that his experience was based on real historic events. And as I and others have said, when a man can predict and pull off his own death and resurrection with hundreds of witnesses to it, I'm just going to go with whatever he said. So you may not think this literally happened. In the end, that's okay. I do. And we can agree to disagree on that, but whether you believe it literal, like me, or metaphorical, or allegory, it's in here for a reason. Because within this story, we find ourselves. Because every one of us, at one point in our lives, has attempted to run from God. And as many of us have discovered, as eventually we will all discover, you can run from God, but you cannot outrun God. Now, obviously, I don't mean to grab everything and sprint off physically like we're going to see that Jonah did. I'm talking about how in your life, in my life, but in your life, you have a sense of God's will in some area of your life or your life as a whole, but His will doesn't align with your will. So your response is, thanks God, but no thanks. That intentionally or unintentionally, maybe, you kind of turn your back on God and you go the opposite direction. For me, the truth is that from a pretty young age, mainly through my grandparents, I really did come to believe that there was a good and benevolent God. I even believed Jesus was who He said He was. But the problem is that that in my life, especially between the 9th grade and my first year in the Navy, clearly my will and God's will did not align at all. And what I mean by that is I had read enough of the Bible, I'd been told enough by Christians in my life, even people that I respected, even promptings that I felt in my heart, where I knew that there were things and, let's just say, extracurricular activities that God absolutely wanted me to say no to, that I absolutely wanted to say yes to, and things that He wanted me to say yes to, that there is no way I wanted to say yes to those things. So essentially, here's how I would sum up my thought process when it came to God. It's, God, I know you're there, and I know what you want, but I'm going to need you to wait until I get all this other stuff out of my system. Then, in a few years, when it's all out of my system, then I'll become a real Christian and get on board with your agenda. Because there are just some things and some activities and some behaviors that I just know I'm going to say yes to, that you want me to say no to. And if I become like a devoted Christian right now, I'm just going to fail, and then I'll just be worse off than before. So I'm just going to need you to be patient. And that's a pretty accurate summary of my dumb thought process. And most of us have a story of a moment or a season of our life or our life as a whole where the fact is we put God in a box, on a shelf, or we put Him in the rearview mirror until we needed Him, and we just headed in our own direction. And for some of you, this isn't just in the past, this is happening right now. Like again, as you think about your life and a God, and it's essentially like, listen, God, I have a sense of your will, but your will and desires don't align with mine, so thanks, but no thanks. Or, like many of us can do, God, I'm going to give you all these other areas, and in all these other areas, I'm going to be a good Christian in every other area, but in this one, I just kind of need you to look the other way. I need you to avert your eyes. I just need you to be patient, stay out of it, because I have this need, I have this desire, I have this appetite, and I need to be fulfilled, so I'm going to fulfill it. Or God, I need you to look the other way in this area because, she's really beautiful and you don't, buy a pair of shoes before trying them on, and, I'm actually being smart by making sure that we're compatible, and, or God, he's really cute and he makes me laugh, like he can always become more Christian, he can't get more cute. Or you discover marriage is a lot harder than you ever imagined it to be, and now you want out, but God is saying, no, you need to stay in. But you're going, but I want out because God, clearly, I married the wrong person. It's even more clear now that, I met this other person at work or at my kid's school, and I just feel so good when I'm around them, so clearly I married the wrong person. Or when it comes to dealing with your finances, maybe you're dealing with a way in an area, it's a little shady or it's not shady, but it's unwise. It's like, listen, God, like I know the borrower is slave to the lender. Don't be a slave. Be free. Be generous towards people. Be generous towards the efforts of things that are close to your heart. But it's a great lease deal. It's 0% interest. I know it's more house than we can afford, but our income will grow into it and we can work it out. And yeah, I'm living check to check. I can't pay off my credit cards. And yeah, I don't have much left over for the things that are important to you, but here are some leftovers. And you're afraid to ask if, God, how would you like me to handle my money? Because you have a feeling God would say, well, not the way you're handling it, so you just don't want to know. And see, we all tend to be hypocrites because here's what we do. We say, God, please do all of these things for me. Please protect my family. Please take care of my children and make this loved one healthy and this one happy and do all these things that are important to me. But at the same time, don't mess with this particular area of my life. Because in this area, I just want you to stay in your box, or I want you to stay in the rearview mirror. I know better than you do in this area of my life. And every one of us have some times in our lives where we run from God. And we all run for the same reasons. And again, for some of you, what I've described, it isn't in the past, it's right now with your life or a specific area of your life. It's been not your will, God, but mine be done. Thanks, but no thanks. Thanks for your input. Thanks, God, for the suggestions, even the counsel, but no thanks. And the interesting thing is for all of us, is my tendency, your tendency, is to think that your life experiences, your desires, your challenges, your temptations, your struggles, the temptation is to think that these are all unique, that you're unique. And the thing is, you're not. We're not. We're just not unique. We end up experiencing basically what is every other man and every other woman's story. And these stories are not unique. And we all run for the same reason. We run because we think, if I don't run, I'm going to miss out on something good. That's what it boils down to. That God has a plan and a will, and what I want and what God wants is different. And if I go with God's plan, I'm going to miss out on something good. So God, because I don't want to miss out on good things, thanks, but no thanks. I'm out. And we run from God and we run towards things that we think are good things. It began with the very first man, the very first woman. It's the story of our lives because even though He's God and He's infinite and He's big and He put the stars and the sun and the universe in its place and created over 400,000 species of beetles, it's like we don't trust Him because we're smarter than God. Now, unfortunately, another reason people run is that they confuse God with their local church. They grew up in a church where they got beat up and kicked around, or like the countless individuals that I've sat across from and had painful conversations of abuse, mentally, physically, even sexually, by individuals, usually men in positions of authority. And because they so closely associate God with their church or their religious experience, their so-called leaders, of course they run. But again, none of our situations are unique. And as many of us can attest to, you can run from God, but you cannot outrun God. And as we're going to see in the series, that's actually a good thing. Now, if you have a Bible or Bible app you'd like to follow along, we're going to be in Jonah chapter 1. This is the Old Testament book of Jonah, and we're going to start in chapter 1. We'll also put the verses on the screen. But this is Jonah chapter 1, verse 1. We're told that the word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai, go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me. Now, this and what comes later provides an incredible insight about God. That God had looked down on this nation of Nineveh, He saw its wickedness, and for a long time He seemingly didn't do anything. It's like He put up with it, He put up with it, He put up with it, until He decided, I've just about had enough, but before I turn the lights out, I'm going to give them one more opportunity to repent. And in his grace and his mercy and his kindness, he decides to send Jonah, him as a prophet to warn them, hey, one more time, listen, get your act together as a nation, or I'm going to judge you. So Jonah, you go, preach to them. But Jonah responded, paraphrase, thanks God, but no thanks. Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish. Now, when you hear that, that means nothing. So let's get a visual. So here's a map. So Nineveh is about 555 miles to the east of where Jonah is, and Tarshish is 2,500 miles in the opposite direction. So this wasn't just a no. This was a, oh, no. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for that port, and after paying the fare, he went aboard the ship and he sailed for Tarshish. Why? To flee from the Lord. Now, see, if you ever feel like the Bible doesn't have any humor in it, like sometimes you just miss it. This should prove otherwise. Like the dude gets on a vessel that stalls, advances, or sinks, depending entirely on elements that are completely out of human control. Wind, weather patterns, and a massive body of water that is over 1 million square miles. This is how he decides to run from God. And here we see the very first thing that everybody who runs from God does. Where do all runners from God run to? They run to dangerous places. They run to self-destructive places. They run to places that if they were on the outside watching the runner run, they would say to themselves what we would say to Jonah, like a boat, Jonah? Like seriously? Like not a boat. Listen, if you're going to run from God, you run on dry ground. Like why would you get on a boat? It would be like saying, I'm going to run from God, so I'm getting on a plane. Or I'm going to go skydiving, or I'm going to go scuba diving. Like, if you're going to run from God, go somewhere safe. And yet what I've seen more times than I can count in my over 30 years in ministry as a pastor, and what I know from my own life, is that when you decide to turn your back and run from God, you go to the dumbest places. You and I run to places that when you come to your senses later in life, you go, how could I have been so stupid? What was I thinking? Which is why your Heavenly Father and the people who love you look at your decisions and say, you're going to do what? You're going to sleep with who? You're going to date who? You're going to move in? You're going to marry who? You're going to work where? You borrowed what? You invested what? You leased what? Because from everybody else's perspective, it's so clear. And any and every time you decide, thanks God, but no thanks, people never run to safety. They run to strange and dangerous environments. And then, in just a matter of time, what happens to people who run from God is ultimately their life begins to unravel. Eventually, not immediately, like not overnight or not in a weekend or not 15 minutes after the decision, but over time, runners begin to self-destruct. And this is so important to understand, that when you turn your back on God, you turn your back on the source of wisdom and truth. And when you turn your back on the source of wisdom and truth, you inevitably make unwise and misinformed decisions. In your mind, all of us, we think we are making the right decision. We're doing the smart thing. But in reality, you can't help it. You make unwise, misinformed decisions. And when you do that, eventually those decisions come back to haunt you. See, this is why I love our church, because we started this church for ex-runners. We started this church with ex-runners in mind, for people who are beginning to rethink the direction of their life. They can come here, that no matter the reason, or if they come banged up and limping from the choices that they've made and life beating them up, that when they've decided to quit running from God, that here they can find a home, a family, and a community of other ex-runners. They can come, even though now maybe they have financial problems or marriage problems or failed marriage problems, kid problems, or they're dealing with greater depression and anxiety because of the mess and the consequences created by their own decisions. And they're looking at themselves going, how could I have been so dumb? Well, we're here to partner with God to wade into the mess with them. The other thing that all runners experience is that when you turn your back on God, you turn your back on the thing that every one of us, men and women alike, so desperately long for. You turn your back on the source of unconditional love and acceptance. In other words, other than God and your mama, there is no one else in the world that can love you absolutely and unconditionally. Every man, every woman longs for and desires to be accepted and loved unconditionally. And the problem is, when you run from God, you're running towards something else, you're running away from God, you run from the exclusive source of that kind of love. And then what happens is, by human nature, you end up spending, you're just forced by your human nature to spend an inordinate amount of time and money trying to squeeze it out of experiences and stuff in a career, and especially the people closest to you, trying to squeeze something out of them that is just not there to give. You know, you get married and you try to squeeze it out of the person that you're married to, but they don't have it to give. So you decide, well, clearly something's wrong with him. He doesn't really love me. It's her fault. So then you turn to other means, other methods to try and fulfill that longing, or you have an affair, or you get divorced and remarried, only to end up experiencing the same emptiness, because what you're looking for is actually in the rearview mirror. Another thing that happens when you say thanks God but no thanks, when you run from God, you turn your back on your purpose. See, everything was created by God for a purpose, which means that you were created by God for a purpose. And I don't care how smart or educated you are never going to find your created purpose in a life apart from the Creator. And what a tragedy it is to blow through your 20s thinking it's going to happen in your 30s, and then blow through your 30s thinking, well, it's going to happen in my 40s, and then you get about halfway through your 40s and you just suddenly realize, you know what, it's just more of the same. And you begin to experience this awful sense of purposelessness. Life just seems to be driven by this unrelenting force of time and age and gravity, and you finally realize your time really is like an hourglass, and there really is only so much sand at the top, and it's running out, because here comes another new year, and another new year, and another new year, and another Christmas, and another Christmas, and I realize I've got 5 Christmases left with my kids, and 4, 3, 2, 1, and they're gone, and now what? And I've seen, for example, so many couples, even Christian couples, who in their life or in key areas had decided, you know, God, thanks, but no thanks. I'm not going to do it your way. And then the kids are gone, and they're looking at one another and going, you know what? I have not found what I was looking for in you. I think I've still got enough looks and time. I think I'm going to find someone else that makes me feel fulfilled and happy and loved, because we may have raised these kids together, but there's no real love. There's no real relationship. I'm not getting what I want out of this, so I'm out. But the problem is, no matter what you do or what you go after, it is always going to come up empty, because it's only in the Creator that the creation finds and thrives in the purpose for which it was created, because everyone who runs to the wrong places. You know what else happens to people who run? As their running begins to unravel and unwind their life, inevitably, runners always hurt the people who are in closest proximity to them. In the story of Jonah, they're on a ship, and all of a sudden there's a storm, and all the sailors that are sailing and responsible for the ship, they're about to lose their life. And then they have to jettison the cargo, which means that these individuals are now losing tons of money, which means because they're going to get into port, they're going to have nothing to sell, they may lose their jobs and lose their livelihood. And what did they do? All they did was take a ticket from a guy and let him on board that was running from God. Like dads, if you decide thanks but no thanks, and you decide to turn your back on and run from God, your wife and your kids will be injured by the inevitable shrapnel of your life, and it will not be their fault. They will be innocent victims. And you praying God bless and protect them is not going to prevent the damage that will come from your decision to run from God. There's a reason we as parents overreact when our kids become friends with or date certain people, because we know if you start hanging out and spending time with and close to someone who's going to do what they want, when they want, with who they want, and God's will doesn't factor in, like, you know, if your kid's in their proximity, your kid is going to be hurt. Because people who run injure the people who run close to them. It's just how it works. Now, here's the amazing thing we're going to see in a minute. When we run, God doesn't just like sit back and fold his hands. Well, there they go. Guess we got to get another one. This is so powerful. What we see illustrated in the story of Jonah is what Jesus taught in the story, for example, of the prodigal son. What we see in the story of Jonah is God's attitude towards the nation of Israel throughout the Old Testament. And it's the entire message of the New Testament. It's a message of forgiveness and grace and mercy, that God in his forgiveness, grace, and his mercy, he will involve himself in, he will plop down right in the middle of the mess and the consequences and the pain that we bring on ourselves. But there's something else that God will do that almost seems to confuse and even conflict with this idea. And that is that God will oftentimes exaggerate the consequences and pain. Now don't miss this. Not to pay us back, but to bring us back. Because listen, Jesus Christ was willing and did die for you. And God was willing to send his son, his only son, to die for you, which means he's already invested so much in you. And if you're a follower of Jesus, he has paid for you. He's already expressed so much grace and love in your directions that it makes sense that he would do as a good father whatever he can to bring you back. And if that means allowing you to not just suffer consequences, but even exaggerated consequences, if that's what it takes to get your attention, then that's what he's going to do. This becomes clear as the story goes on. Jonah goes down below deck. He decides he's going to take a nap because he's just exhausted. The Lord sent a great wind on the sea. Such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. All the sailors were afraid, and it takes a lot to scare a sailor. Okay, this is their element. Yet each cried to his own God, and they threw the cargo into the sea to lighten the ship. But Jonah had gone below deck where he lay down and fell asleep. Sounds like a New Testament story. The captain went with him and said to him, "How can you sleep? Get up and call on your God. Maybe he will take notice of us so that we will not perish." They thought they were going to drown. Then the sailors said to each other, "Come, let us cast lots to find out who is responsible for this calamity." And casting lots was just a form of divination where they would try to discern the will of the God, just like for us modern day, it'd be like a Ouija board. So they cast lots, and by chance, they cast lots, and the lot fell to Jonah. And Jonah knew this is more than just a storm. So they asked him, "Tell us, who is responsible for making all this trouble for us? What kind of work do you do? Where do you come from? What is your country? From what people you are?" They're freaked out. And he answered, "I'm a Hebrew, and I worship," and he uses the intimate Hebrew name for God. "I worship the Lord, the Lord." And then this part, again, is funny. "The God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land, which I should have stayed on. I serve the God who's responsible for all this." This terrified them, and they asked, "What have you done?" They knew he was running away from the Lord because he had already told them so. The sea was getting rougher and rougher, so they asked him, imagine this question: "What should we do to you to make the sea calm down for us?" And this is so important. And Jonah realized what I hope some of you will realize today. He realized, my running is pointless. My running is futile. He realized you can run from God, you cannot outrun God. And you can run, but because of his grace, his mercy, and his unconditional love, you cannot outrun God. He will create consequences that seem like overkill for some of the decisions that you've made, if that's what it's going to take to bring you back. And so Jonah finally surrenders. He says, "Pick me up and throw me into the sea," he replied, "and it will become calm. I know that it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you." He decides there's no reason for these sailors to die with me. And as a side note, again, there's so much imagery of Christ to come, of Jesus at various points in this story. But instead, the men did their best to row back to land, but they could not, for the sea grew even wilder than before. Then they cried out to the Lord. And see, now they've become believers. They're like, "Jonah, okay, what's your God's name? Okay, God of Jonah, please do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing this innocent man. For you, Lord, have done as you have pleased." Then they took Jonah and they threw him overboard, and the raging sea grew calm. And at this, the men greatly feared the Lord, and they offered sacrifice to the Lord and made vows to him. And at that point, Jonah learned something about God, something new. The God who Jesus said we should call Father. It's a lesson we will all learn eventually, that like a father, like the father who watched his youngest, the prodigal son, run away, that when you run from God, that God won't chase you. God waits for you. Because God knew how this was going to work out. Like he didn't stay back in Judea. Like, has anybody seen Jonah? Like, I turned my back for 3 seconds, and I don't even know where he is. Like, we got to find him. No, instead, there's like a big old fish swimming around the Mediterranean Sea that decided to go a certain direction. There's all this choppy water and a storm. He thought, I got to go lower. And just before he went lower, he stretched and yawned. And I was going to show you a video of overseas about the guy that just got swallowed by a whale a while back in a kayak. Just Google it. He wasn't in there as long. And again, I only believe this because Jesus did. The text tells us, now the Lord provided a huge fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. Do you know why God provided the storm? Why God allowed the lot to fall to Jonah? Why God provided the fish? Do you know why Jonah spent 3 unbelievable days and nights in the belly of a fish? Because of unconditional love. It's why God will allow you and I at times to face unbelievable consequences. It's why He will allow you to face financial ruin. It's why He will allow your marriage to just unravel. Allow you to be totally alienated from your kids. It's why He will seemingly ignore your prayers until you come to the end of yourself. It's not to pay you back. It's to bring you back. It's because of His love and His grace that you've turned your back on and said, thanks God, but no thanks to, and walked away from, because God knows that the shortest route for you back to Him is for Him to just allow you, like a good father, to experience the full force of the consequences of you deciding that you're smarter than He is. Saying, not your will, God, but mine be done. So here's what I want to do in a moment, and this doesn't have to be awkward. It's just us. And you may not know this, but one of our stated core values from day one is authentic community. So let's just be honest a minute. Just pretend it was just you and I sitting across one another. We had all of our filters off, all of the posing and pretending and secrets, and you're just being 100% honest and authentic with me. Like, how many of you would say, deep down, I more than sense it. I know this is what God wants of me in this area of my life or that area or just in my life. And the truth is, thus far, it's been thanks God, but no thanks. My will be done. If that's you with no heads bowed and no eyes closed, and you'd just be willing to admit, today, generally, or in some area of my life, it's been my will, not yours, be done, God. I'm a runner. If that's you, would you just be courageous enough to raise your hand? Okay. Good. You can put them down. Now, if you're here today and you'd say, somewhere in my past, I know all about running, and what I've discovered was that when I stopped running, God was waiting for me to stop running, and He welcomed me back. If that is you, would you raise your hand? Yeah. Put your hands down. See, that's powerful. And my prayer coming in to today was, Lord, would you just allow this to be the day for some runners to just come home, to stop running away from you. At 2 a.m. on March 20th, 1989, before some of you were born, I stopped my running. And even after 37 years, 1 month and 1 week later, the emotions of that moment are just so indelibly etched on my heart and my mind. Because I had just piled regret upon regret in my life. I had run to the dumbest places, trying to satisfy the longing of my soul and of being unconditionally loved and accepted, of just trying to maximize pleasure. And honestly, a big part of me thought at that moment of decision, there's no way God will have me now. Not after everything I've said and I've done, knowing full well that I was turning my back on God the whole time. But even so, I dropped to my knees on that dark night, ironically, considering Jonah's context, on board my ship that was in port in San Diego, and with deep, deep emotion and surrender, I prayed, God, I'm done. I'm done running. If you're listening and it's not too late, here I am. Change my life. And while I'm at it, if you would please bring a formerly running woman into my life, that would be great. And all I can say is it was like God was right there with me in that moment. It's like he had just been waiting for that moment, for me to just come to the end of myself. And I could feel it at the core of my soul. And it was like he said to me, I've got you. I've not only been watching, but man, I have been waiting for you. Just wait what I've got in store for you now. And in that moment, the trajectory of my life completely changed. With Jonah, when he hit the water, as a side note, God provided a fish. For me, what God provided was far more pleasant, maybe equally terrifying, because he provided a beautiful 21-year-old green-eyed blonde herself who had just stopped running a couple months before. And he caused her to take notice of me. He prompted her to strategically place herself where she thought I might pass by and take notice and maybe talk to her. And God prompted me to do exactly that. And then 15 months later, she became my wife. And as a note, it wasn't until a few years into marriage that Shauna actually admitted that she stood there hoping that I was going to talk to her. Now, this is important. Just like Jonah was someone who fully believed in God and yet ran, like once you believe, that doesn't mean you stop being a flight risk. Like the verse in the hymn that was written in 1758, let thy goodness like a fetter bind my wandering heart to thee. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, Lord, take and seal it for thy courts above. Like lock me in place, because as a Jesus follower, it's like the Apostle Paul would write hundreds of years later after the resurrection. Paul would write, I find this law at work in me. Although I want to do good, evil is right there with me. For in my inner being, I delight in God's law, but I see another law at work in me, waging war. There's this war against my mind and making me a prisoner of the law of sin at work within me. It's a complex way of saying that on this side of heaven, even after becoming a follower of Jesus from time to time, you are a flight risk. We will repeatedly find ourselves tempted to say, not your will, God, but mine. And there are going to be times where we fail in that. And we say, thanks God, but no thanks. My will, not yours, be done. In my life, there were times and seasons where, like most of you, I was like, God, in all these other areas, yes, your will be done. But in this area or that area, I'm just smart enough. I've got this. Avert your eyes. Thanks God for the input and suggestions, but no thanks. Not your will, mine be done. And the end result was always the same. Pain. Pain and regret. Pain for me, pain for my bride who I love, pain for my children I love, pain for the people who were closest to me. And yet, every time when I finally stopped running in that area and turned around and acknowledged the truth, God was there. He'd never left. And yes, now there was a mess. And yet God was always, every time, willing to wade into the mess, every single time, to bring about healing and reconciliation and restoration. And if you're here today and you say, I don't want to wait until this completely unravels. I don't want to wait until I'm in such a deep financial mess there's no way out. I don't want to wait until this ends in divorce. I don't want to wait until my kids are grown and gone. I don't want to look back and think I've blown through my 20s and my 30s and my 40s, even my 50s and 60s, and now I realize I'm running out of time. I don't want to do that. I don't want to end up with more regret. I want to stop running away. I don't want to run away any longer. Just today, I just want to give you the opportunity to make that decision. So the band's going to come up, and they're actually going to lead us in a song that is about running, but it's about running in the right direction, towards the right thing, more accurately, towards the right someone, towards the Father. But my hope for any of you who are running in any area of your life, or your life as a whole, my hope is today that you would just decide, that's it. I'm done. I'm not going to run from God anymore. Instead, I'm going to run towards the Father. Let me pray for us. Father, the fact is I'm not just a former runner. There continues to be times where, as the old hymn writer writes, there's that temptation to wander and just take off in the opposite direction. And Father, it's something that we all deal with in our life, because this side of heaven, it's just, we live in this flesh, we live in this broken world. We're just surrounded by temptations and distractions and things that all want to lead us in the very opposite direction that you want us to go. It's why we see so much pain and suffering and injustice and even evil in the world. So Father, I pray for all of us and everyone listening to my voice that God, that you would give us eyes to see and the courage to acknowledge where we may be running, and that you'll give us the courage to acknowledge it, to admit it, to stop, and to just stop and turn around, to face you, to, as the prodigal son, to return to you in a run. And I also pray for all of us, Father, that tomorrow, next week, next year, again, we're going to be presented with an opportunity to go our own direction and resist your call. And I pray, Father, you will give us the strength and the courage, as well as the authentic community of people around us that prevents us from taking that even one step in the wrong direction. Father, I pray all this in the name of Jesus.